Hey guys, welcome to this very new episode of Consumers Don't Care. And today I'm really excited because we have someone who is who is not a brand founder, or he's not an agency owner, or he's not just an operator, but he's a mix of all the stuff. So he's a person who has done a lot of things in terms of building a brand from scratch and also running an agency. So the insights that we are going to get in this podcast will be really interesting, not just for brand owners, agency owners, but for everyone literally who's in this DTC entire universe dealing with consumer products. So I'm really excited to host you, Feras. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
So, like, Feras, to start with, I just want you to give us a short intro about you, what all you do, so our audience knows what to expect from this conversation.
Yeah, totally. So I actually come from an engineering background, have a master's in engineering and another one in business. But I tell people all the time, you actually don't need, I don't think you really need much of a degree at all for any type of business or life in general, but that's probably a conversation for a different time. Um, but my first endeavor into e-commerce was with my primary business called Manssion. Manssion actually launched in 2020 prior to COVID. This was not a COVID baby. It was something we were working up to in 2019. And it stands for Man on a Mission. That's why there's two S's. Our tagline is Set Yourself Apart. And we really wanted to make a splash in the men's jewelry space. There was not really a brand that I resonated with. You had like the cheap stuff you find in the middle of the mall or at H&M or whatever, or Amazon that's low quality stainless steel breaks. And then you had like the David Yurmans of the world, which is actually an incredible brand. Same thing with the Tiffany's and the Cartiers. But a lot of people don't have the money to purchase those pieces, those high quality pieces, and it's also the branding is speaking to a much higher demographic. Um, so we decided to launch Mansion. 2020 was our first year. Had a lot of success, and over the next 3 years, grew it to an eight-figure brand. Throughout that time, I've been lucky to meet a bunch of incredible founders and network with agency owners. And so I really started getting a lay of the land. A few people from the brand side had reached out for help growing their brand, whether it was with branding, product development, general insights. And so I kind of got into the apparel space a little bit. It's similar to jewelry in some ways, at least the aesthetics. And so became equity partner in a couple of other clothing brands. One of them being Lovesick, a lot of people tend to know about. And, again, just started getting more involved in the community. And then people kept asking for help. And I was like, I need to figure out a way to really work with these brands kind of at scale and provide them more than just what I can provide them solely. And, I'd always worked with agencies, hired and fired a bunch, and I just thought a lot of them sucked. Not all of them. I don't want to get my agency friends pissed off at me, but a lot of them just didn't do a great job. They are very one dimensional. They're very transactional. A lot of people who worked in agencies have never worked on the direct to consumer side, have never founded a business, have never worked inside of a business, so they don't understand how what they provide fits into the bigger picture, right? It's just, hey, here's money for email, here's money for a video, here's money for whatever. So that's kind of where Make Waves was born. Myself, my two partners, one is very focused on content. He's an absolute beast when it comes to that. The other one is very focused on email and SMS marketing, and I kind of tie everything together with the acquisition and the e-commerce piece. And together we have 30 plus years of e-commerce experience, either founding companies or working directly in companies. And so that's really been the reason we've been able to scale that so quickly, is because when we're talking with brand owners, they love that we've been on the business side of things and we understand more than just content, email, and acquisition. We understand holistically how to help work with businesses to grow them down to the P&L level, right? We understand marketing efficiency ratios and gross margins and how conversion rates and average order values and customer lifetime values and repurchase rates and all these things that most agencies don't understand or care to know about. So that's the 30,000 foot view, but it's been very interesting being on the brand side and also on the growth partner agency side.
First, quickly tell us what's the size of these brands and your agency, so like we people get a context of what we are talking about.
Yeah, totally. So, Manssion's an eight-figure brand. The apparel company, the other one that I mentioned earlier, seven-figure brand. The other apparel is just barely started, so six-figure brand. That one hopefully will be seven figures here pretty soon. Agency is relatively new; it's this year, but we're already a seven-figure company as well.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. My primary one is Mansion, right? And then the agency, I'm lucky to have a fantastic team. And I'm not the CEO of the agency. I didn't start the company. I'm not the CEO. My partner TJ is, so he's really just been fantastic to work with, as well as Eric, our other partner.
And so, like, been running all this stuff. So, what are your roles in each of these businesses?
Totally. So Mansion's the primary thing here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of that. The other two apparel brands, I'm more of a consulting role. So I'm equity partner, and I focus on a lot of the product development, website retention, stuff like that. Very not an incredibly intensive day to day type thing. With Make Waves, I'm a partner and also head of ecom. So dealing with the biggest clients of ours to tie everything together from them and or tie everything together for them, right? So when I'm having conversations with the founders of these bigger brands, we're not only talking about the email marketing that we provide or the content that we provide, but I'm having deeper conversations with them about the general business, right? What are some of the issues you're having? Are your customer acquisition costs rising? What new products are you dropping? What's your strategy? That's the value that I bring to the agency side, is the deeper ecom knowledge.
And so, like, we already discussed how you started Manson 3 years back. So, I want you to dive a little bit on the story of how it all started. Were you the first one to just like how it came from idea to execution phase? Like, what's the journey behind it?
Yeah, it was actually pretty interesting. My one of the co-founders I actually went to high school with, but we hadn't talked for many, many years, and then we reconnected when I was visiting my family on a treadmill, and I never run on treadmills. And then we became really good friends. This was 10 plus years ago. And then I basically, I've always wanted to start my own company. I
Where did
remember
it happen? What was the place?
where we reconnected. It was in LA Fitness in Glendale, Arizona. Very random. And yeah, we reconnected and then just became really, really good friends. And I had always wanted to start my own company, even going through school, right? Doing all this schooling. I just realized that like a 9 to 5 is not for me. So I sent him a document one day called water bottles. And the reason it was called water bottles is because I was just so flabbergasted at how Hydro Flask at the time was like all the rage, and all these water bottle companies were popping up, and I was like, how are they selling tens of millions of dollars of water bottles? This is insane. We could totally do something. So I sent him a document with like a bunch of stuff on there, you know, things that I thought were our strengths, things that I thought were our weaknesses, things that I thought people would pay for, gaps I found in the market relative to our demographic. And then I just started listing ideas. I listed jewelry, I listed Tupperware for bodybuilders, I listed leather goods, I listed athleisure wear, all kinds of stuff that I just didn't find in the market that I liked or thought it would be a cool idea. And jewelry, I've always worn jewelry, but I never, I always kind of like pieced stuff together myself. And then he came back and was like, I think jewelry is a great idea. That was my number one choice, and then we just started going. So we knew nothing about e-commerce. I didn't know
And
much
what were
about
you doing
jewelry.
when you just got started? So before this, what were you doing? What was your background?
Yeah, so master's in engineering, started working at a tech company as a product manager, and then got them to pay for my MBA. So at the time, I was working full time and also getting an MBA, and just not enjoying the 9 to 5 so much. I
So
remember when they first
how
took me
long did you like do this job?
3 years. And that was so this was at the tail end of that. And so I remember when they took me through my orientation and they handed me my laptop, I like sat down and Googled how to start your own company, like day one of my first 9 to 5 ever. I was like, I don't like this. um, but I didn't go to school for business prior to the MBA, right? Like I didn't know anything. I didn't know what distributors were. I didn't know what margins were. I didn't know anything about business. I did not come from that background whatsoever. Uh, so once we decided to go with the jewelry stuff, we had to we had to learn e-commerce, and so that's kind of where the journey began. We brought on our third co-founder very early on. His name is Yorgi, and Tori, who's my first co-founder and best friend, like he's incredibly analytical. Yorgi is very, very creative. And I'm kind of in the middle. I go on the analytical side and I also go on the creative side. So it's a really, really good mix. And it's funny because that's actually mirrored on the agency side. TJ is very creative, Eric is very analytical, and I kind of straddle both sides of the fence. I didn't even realize that until like a couple weeks ago. I was like, holy shit, this is kind of the same in both sides. But yeah, just to answer your question, that's how it started. We found manufacturers and we made a lot of mistakes and launched in 2020.
And how long did it take from the idea, like from pitching it to your friend, ideating that, okay, now we'll start a jewelry brand, finding the manufacturers and like getting the website ready, start kickstarting the ads and the first sale. So, what was the duration that it took?
Probably like a year and a half, I would say. And now, if I was to do it over again, which we did with another company, it you could do it in like 6 months. It's just you have to. We were learning everything from scratch. We didn't know anything about conversion rate optimization. We didn't know anything about Shopify. We didn't know anything about email. We had no ties to any manufacturers. We didn't know anything. We didn't know anything about what your margins should be, where you should price your products. So it was an incredible learning journey. It taught me more than my MBA ever did.
And
It
how did you
was
all like figure out all this stuff? Like, was it just by doing it, or like you used to Google it, you used to watch some YouTube channels and learn the stuff? You took some courses, hired someone. Like, how did you learn all this stuff?
everything. Never took a course, but everything else besides that. Just a lot of mistakes, a lot of watching other brands, reaching out to other brands. Lucky, that we have a big network of entrepreneurs who've done incredible things. We're friends with a lot of people who have grown, 8, 9 figure brands and have exited, and they're great friends of ours. So they were always a fantastic resource. Um, yeah, lots of mistakes. YouTube.
That's a crazy story, man. Starting from
Yeah, my
LA
my
and
partner was a cop. He was a police officer.
oh wow.
Uh, yeah, he was a police officer, and then he quit his job, and now he's fantastic. I would say one of the best media buyers out there. I think many people would say that. My other partner was in liquor and cannabis sales, and I think he's one of the best branding guys out there. So yeah, yeah, but he crushes it. He crushed it. So it's funny. We all kind of took a little bit of our background and ran with it. Maybe not the police officer thing, but definitely me and the other guy.
Maybe something from that experience would have also worked out.
I think so. I think you got to be pretty fearless when you're a police officer, and I think when you're media buying, you probably got to be a little fearless too. Let things run and not fiddle with stuff.
True, man. Agreed. So let's talk a bit about like the both parts of your personality, that is being an agency owner, working with like serving brands and running your own brands. This is a very interesting mix. You don't really find people who are able to do it because these are very like two very different kind of people. So as a brand owner, I have a question. So if you're a brand owner, if you like, so let talk to us about what happened during Mansion. So when was the time you started outsourcing some stuff, operational stuff like be it media buying or be it email marketing, whatever it is? So when did you start outsourcing it?
Yeah, I mean, when you first start a brand, unless you have funding, which we didn't, you're basically doing everything yourself. So I guess the best answer to that, it's like twofold. Number one, when we could afford it, and number two, once we started realizing what our strengths were. So we outsourced media buying for a little bit, but we actually brought it back in house because my partner is fantastic at acquisition. And there's certain things that we're just like he's great at that, right? So why outsource that at the time? Right. And then like certain thing, email marketing, like, yeah, I could do it, but not fantastic. So should probably outsource that. So it's really a combination of what is your core competency as a person and as a business, and what can you afford? Because ideally, right from the bat, you outsource every single thing that you can that you suck at. But that's just not feasible for a lot of brands. You got to make sure that you're doing the things that are going to bring the most ROI at the time. And then, over time, hopefully you could outsource more and more things that you suck at, or, bring in talent, however you want to look at it.
So like this conversation has been floating around on the internet. I saw it on LinkedIn and Twitter as well, that you should never hire an agency until you have reached $5 million in revenue. So I particularly think this is pretty lame, because there's you can't set a revenue target to decide whether you need help of an agency or not. It really depends on you as a brand, how many, like as you said, like what all stuff are you good at, and what all stuff can you do it in house, and what do you need outside help with. So what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I think I think that's ridiculous, and I think it's just very broad. Like, first of all, what agency? Second of all, there's companies doing $5 million a year that are very profitable. There's companies doing $5 million a year who are not profitable, right? So it that's a very, very broad statement. If you have absolutely no idea how to do media buying, you should probably bring on a media buyer pretty early on if that's your primary acquisition channel, right? So if you have absolutely no idea how to make content, that's something that you should probably bring on early on, right? So I don't think it's relevant.
And what's wrong with agencies for us? I just want to understand this thing. The common like notion about agencies is that these are bad guys. They don't really help. They like they like something is it really goes off when you like start a discussion about agencies. What do you think? What's wrong?
I think there's a handful of great agencies out there. I think there's some good ones, and I think there's a lot of bad ones because anybody could just start saying they're an agency and start providing a service, right? Again, as a brand owner, I've hired and fired numerous different agencies because they just didn't understand business. They didn't know how what they were doing fits into the greater picture and what we were trying to achieve strategically and holistically as a business. Furthermore, a lot of them have never worked in a company or for a company, so they don't really know, like, they don't provide great work, right? Like, we had an email agency early on, and I was doing better than them, and we were paying them $5,000 plus a month, right? This was multiple years ago, but like, why?
Better in what sense? Better in terms of
Everything was
execution
better.
or in
The open
results?
Yeah, the emails looked better and our open rates were better, our revenue was higher. I was doing better than they were, right? So it's like you just have a lot of people out there, especially I think early on. I think it's changing now. Like early on in ecom, 2016, 18, 2020 to some degree, like it was a very different landscape. Customer acquisition costs were much cheaper. People were scaling at a much more rapid rate. uh, you didn't have to be as good at stuff. Your company maybe didn't have to be as dialed or as profitable or as uh, how do I put it, concise and intentional with what it was doing because shit was just going haywire. There gnarly demand. Again, CAC was super cheap. Nowadays, it's a little bit different, right? Things have to be a lot cleaner. And that, by the
It's
way, I just want to
completely
say that's
different,
not
I would say. It's completely
it's
different from. So like I started like doing this all marketing stuff, and Like I got into DTC 3 years back, and during that day, it was like if you wanted to do media buying, then it was all like you like we never ask for creatives to the client. It was all like do something on Canva, something on Photoshop, put together a product image, and just start running ads, and you started getting sales. But I think, like I would say, now it has gotten way more fundamental. Earlier it was more tactical and key, like can you click this button, this is a quick hack, this is a quick interest that you can tap into. But now it's becoming very much more fundamental key. Are you a good brand with good values, with great product, and overall a great, providing a great service?
You're 100% right. I mean, you could throw like, and I don't want this to sound like I'm taking away from people who grew companies at that time, because I'm not. I mean, there's a lot of incredible companies, but the fact of the matter is, like, it was easier to get people to purchase things online earlier. It was cheaper, right? You were getting $15 customer acquisition costs, like whatever, and CACs are continuing to rise as more people come on the platform, spend more money, as targeting gets more difficult. So you have to be, like you said, you have to be a lot more fundamental. You have to be a lot cleaner. A lot of agencies were able to survive in that environment because the work didn't have to be as good. Now the work has to be great, right? And now people are looking at their business holistically and omni-channel. And an email marketing agency at that time probably didn't really care what your conversion rate was, or your average order value was, or what products yielded the highest customer lifetime values and the shortest repurchase rates. Now it's important that you know that, because we're, as a brand owner, I want to drive people to the right place that's going to convert customers higher, that's going to give them what they're looking for, and that's going to get them to come back and purchase again quicker, because all of this stuff makes a bigger difference when, again, CACs are rising. Like, you, for example, a lot of agency owners maybe don't know that, like, it's a lot harder to acquire if your retention is not dialed in. Like, that wasn't necessarily the case before. Like, retention, or your acquisition, you're getting customers, right? But your retention is really where you're going to turn a lot of the profits. Like, email is typically one of the most profitable channels. And obviously everything works together symbiotically, but people didn't have to know that back in the day.
Yeah, more or less, because they used to make and the drop shipping trend was full on. So you used to make a lot of profit on the like first purchase, because there was no question of second purchase. When it was a time of making a second purchase, maybe the store wasn't there. So that was the trend.
Yeah.
So it was all about acquire, acquire, acquire. Retention was in no question. But when acquisition started, like the CAC started going up, this and like the entire mess of iOS 15 happened. Later
Mhm.
people started to realize, okay, email is a thing that I like. Why I say people, it's me. Like, we also started to realize, because we are doing just ads, then we got into retention, because we saw, yeah, our clients need retention. Like, because without retention, there's no, like, it's not possible to actually sustain, especially for brands that are bootstrapping themselves. So they can't just keep burning money and money, so they can't keep pouring money on ads and keep acquiring but not make any profits.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of brands, including us at one time, where acquisition, like your acquisition basically outpaces your retention. Like, you can only scale as hard as your retention will really let you, unless you're incredibly profitable on the first purchase. Which, we are first purchase profitable, but a lot of brands aren't. A lot of brands do rely on the retention, or their profits on the first purchase are slim. So, the golden formula: traffic times conversion rate times average order value equals sales. Like, that's and every variation of that is really what you're trying to um, optimize for all of time, right? So, like, how and average order value obviously gets broken up into customer lifetime value. So how do you optimize that? You could sell a very expensive product a small amount of times, or you could sell a very cheap product a lot of times, and it could work in both ways. But in either case, I think retention is a very important part of the equation.
Also, for us, do you see brands these days are they getting leaner, or they are getting bulky in terms of people that they need? So, for example, there's a $1 million brand. So the number of people who needs to like who they need to hire. So Is it getting less, or is it increasing?
Every brand that I've spoken to is getting leaner and has gotten leaner. Again, it was a different time, and you need to be very concise with your talent and your energy, because you could easily bloat stuff. Like I love Twitter, let me just say, or X. But there's, every other day there's a new software that comes up, and I'm sure there's some that's great, and I'm sure there's some that's not. But you could over bloat your P&L pretty quickly, whether it's people or software, right? You have a million different SaaS companies on there, and all of a sudden your overhead drastically increases, and you're just slowly, it's death by a thousand cuts, right? Not necessarily one big thing. So I think that's another thing people need to be aware of, is like, just focus on the fundamentals, and it's not always about, like, tech is for sure important, but there's a lot of tech out there. You got to be very choosy and make sure that the ROI backs out.
And how do we go about choosing your tech? Because as a as a person who is handling a brand, there's a, I think for every single thing that they want to do, they have it something like they have a Shopify app for that. So how do you go about choosing the tech, choosing the right tech, or choosing, I would say, the minimum necessary tech that you need to running a brand?
Yeah, I mean, the minimum stuff is pretty obvious, right? You need like an email service provider. You need a way to capture and send text messages. Like there's some pretty obvious ones out there. So besides those, um, some of it is brand specific. For us, upsells and cross sells is huge. But really, it boils down to ROI. That's it. That's all it boils down to. And oftentimes, I will work with these tech partners to do trials. I almost never sign up for tech unless there's a trial, and I see how it works. It's going to do one of two things. It's going to make us more money, or it's going to save us a shit ton of time. And if it's not doing one of those, we don't do it.
If you want to sum it up, like in Mansion, what are the
Yeah,
3 to 4 ESPs that you can't survive without?
that we can't live without. Ooh, that's a tough one. Um, to so one of my favorites is I got to get paid for this, dude. No, I'm just kidding. One of my favorites is Rebuy. Rebuy has been great. Rebuy is a cross selling and an upselling platform that's really helped us uh, increase our average order value and increase the amount of units per transaction, basically. So that's been a huge one on many different fronts. Also a fan of attribution tech, like blot out. Blot out's a big one. Um, that's more on the acquisition side. Um, Also helps with email, right? Because a lot of people will go between devices and go on um, product pages and do different things, right? So making sure that you could attribute people to their triggers. So anything to do with that. Um, I mean, those are the big, and then of course the insights, right? Those are all huge. I was thinking more on the acquisition side. Anything to use with insights, right? So North Beam, Triple Whale, Peel, all these things are incredibly important, and we're in on a day to day basis. What else? Try not to give you any of the obvious one. I think those are the most important ones for now. There's a bunch, man. There's a lot out there.
Yeah, it's hard to remember actually. I just threw the question at you, but I knew it was going to be a difficult answer.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But to simplify it, it's like it's some of it's unique to your business model. There's some that's not, but there's some that are. Like for example, the rebuy one. That's important for us. For other people, it could be a subscription type model. I don't know. Just depends.
It's all about maximizing every customer that you're getting. So, like once you start, because again, it all comes down to the ROI thing that, as you said, cost cost per acquisition is going up. You need to like have a good ROI so as to make any profit.
Yeah, exactly.
For us now, like this is an interesting question. Tell me one thing that you hate as a brand owner. like I want you to switch on your mode of a brand owner. And like now you're mansion founder now you're not talking
Okay.
to me as a like make from your make waves agency. As a brand
Yeah.
founder, what is the one thing that you hate from agencies?
Uh, the biggest thing that I hate from agencies, I mean, there's a couple things. There's a few things. Um, just the so I would say the number one thing is that when they onboard you, they give you their A team, and then when you're onboarded, you get like a B or a C team, right? So you get sold this dream, and then who you're working with and the work they produce is not on par with who you spoke to in the first place.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
that's hard. Yeah, totally makes sense. And
Yeah, you kind of get passed
no,
around,
no,
right?
yeah, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. So now let's switch on the Feras from the agency. So you like the brand own like the brand that you just onboarded expects the same out of you. So now how do you work it
Yeah.
out?
hmm So how do I how do I combat what I just said with our agency?
Yeah, how do you combat
Well,
what you just said, like that in agency?
yeah. Well, for us, first and foremost, we've all either founded or worked inside brands. So we have the knowledge of how to interact with these brands and what they're really looking for. They're looking for good communication, clear communication. They're looking for strong execution, right? So for us, we have the knowledge. We have a small team, and everyone on our team knows about every other part of the business. So anyone that works on content understands deeply e-com and retention. Anyone that works on retention understands e-com and content. It's all we have that tacit knowledge. So whoever you
How
talk
big is
to,
the team right now?
so there's three founders, and then we have like three or four other people that work with like side by side, or I don't like to say below us, but that work with us. So it's a relatively small team. Our goal is not to take on a million clients. Our goal is to be more high touch, bring on partners that we like, both people and brand, and be more of a boutique type agency slash growth partner.
Makes sense. But like, what about these agencies for us who are not brand owners? They
Mhm.
have good expertise and they want to scale their agency. They don't want to run a boutique agency, so they need to
Yeah.
hire people who gets clients, like salespeoples. So
Yep.
sales guys who gets on phone and tell them, "Ki, yeah, this is a problem. We have audited your brand and we'll get you better results." So
Yeah.
what should ideally be a good way to look at these agencies, and how can they like persevere to like have a good relation with the brand?
Yeah, I mean, I've never scaled an agency to that level. So it's hard for me to say. I've spoken to other agencies who are bigger, and they've been very fortunate to give me advice and help me out. So I could only really speculate. Um, what I would think is that you would not want to have siloed teams. So an email team, a content team, an acquisition team, a this team, right? I would think you would want to have some sort of structure where the email person is talking to the acquisition person, is talking to the content person, is talking to the strategist, right? Where it's like you have pods instead of silos, because that's what we try to do just on a smaller scale, where it's like every single service for that account is in tandem and in lockstep so that you're getting a cohesive experience and you're looking at it holistically. Does that make sense? Hopefully I explained that well. Again, I've never done it before, but that's what I would anticipate would be the right path forward.
And I think it's really interesting because people who are running big agencies, they are like building massive teams of retention who have like 20 people who are doing the same stuff. But again, they are just doing retention. They are not like they don't really know outside anything outside retention. So yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be hard, man. I mean, not a lot of I don't know how many people out there have worked on the brand side and now work on an agency side, or how many have knowledge about what it takes to really grow a direct to consumer brand. So I can't imagine it's easy to find a lot of people out there with that skill set, but I think a way around that could be how you structure the team to make sure that everyone from every vertical is integrated and learning together and they're not siloed and information isn't being blocked.
What changes in a communication, Ferris, after you have ran a brand? So you in general are way too much empathetic towards a brand owner who is facing a struggle maybe in your
Mhm.
agency. So how different would the conversation be when you are talking to them?
I mean, I've talked to pre-revenue companies and I've talked to companies doing 150 plus $1 million a year, to the founders. And every single time they love the fact that I founded a company and my partners have worked in companies. They all mention that, right? Because that's a lot of the times, yes, sometimes people need help, like a lot of help, and their whole retention strategies, whatever, totally messed up. But other times, people just want a team that they can trust. It could be a bandwidth issue, right? They want somebody who's focused on this and they don't want to hire in house. So they have different types of needs. But in either scenario, it's like they just want to make sure that they can trust you. I can't tell you how many brand owners I've talked to that are like, this is my third time trying to work with an agency. The first two times, my open rates were 60%. And now they dipped down to 16% and they screwed everything up. It's like, you either need a lot of help or, when you're dealing with a $150 million company, you're not going to come in and say, have you tried making an engaged customer segment? Like, they're going to laugh at you. Right. So it's like, it's almost like trying to find, I was referring to this the other day. I was talking to a founder who likes sports. I was like, it's like trying to find an issue in Michael Jordan's game. You're making very small tweaks that could make a huge difference versus, trying to find an issue in a high school or a college player's game. Like, it's a lot more obvious. So that's kind of the difference between, smaller brands and larger brands and sometimes what they need.
Right. And more or less, larger brands need an extension to their team, mostly because they just don't want more people on their payroll.
Yeah, they want an extension. They want a team that can execute, a team that can understand, and a lot of times they want creativity. Are you bringing in ideas that are going to be cool and help move the needle? Like, because again, you're not going to come in and be like, oh, flip the switch. You guys didn't have this thing going. Like, they've got to $150 million for a reason, right? So it's going to be incremental wins.
So first, let's do a cool exercise with you. So let's plan to start a brand right away in this podcast. So let's try to start an e-commerce brand, a Shopify store. I want a brand playbook from you. So what are the steps that you would follow? What are the things that you would do from scratch? So now we are just ideating. Now let's just come up with anything that you have in mind and just drop a playbook that people could follow when they want to start a brand and just get going.
Yeah. If you would have asked me this a few years ago, it would have been a little bit different. So right now, I think people need to look at the market and where it's headed, and they need to really understand their business model. Just like we talked about, customer acquisition costs are continuing to rise. There's more competition out there. There's obviously Amazon, as there was before. People are maybe a little bit more price sensitive these days because of the state of affairs. Um, you need to think about, again, the golden formula: traffic times conversion rate, or customer lifetime value, or sorry, traffic times average order value or customer lifetime value times conversion rate equals sales, and then you take the money from the sales and you dump it into getting more traffic to some degree, right? So the first thing I would say, again, my answer would have been different a few years ago. The first thing I would say is, how do you anticipate your business model going? Are you trying to start a company today that you're selling $40 goods and it's not something that people will repurchase? That could be pretty hard, right? I don't know if that's a viable business model if you're selling $40 items that people don't repurchase very often. And the reason for that, again, is because of the customer acquisition costs, right? If you're not first purchase profitable and you don't anticipate people coming back and purchasing a bunch of these things, that could hurt you a lot. So do you want to go retention, low price? Do you want to go high price, retention? Like, there's always kind of trade-offs. If you sell a product for $2,000, most likely that's not something that they're going to need to purchase again and again and again and again. If you sell a product for $50, maybe it's a t-shirt or a hat or something, yeah, there is an opportunity there for retention. If you sell vitamins, you might be not profitable on the first one, but you might make it up with a subscription or a repurchase there. So, not to keep harping on that, but I think that's probably the most important thing is, what is your plan for your acquisition and retention? What do you think that would look like? I think that's by far the most important thing.
Okay,
And then
that's the
from
first step.
there,
So I'll answer
yeah,
you like what I'm trying to start. So let's start a footwear
okay.
brand. So
A
let's
what?
kickstart a footwear brand. Like
Footwear
let's
brand.
sell shoes. Yeah, let's sell
Okay.
shoes. Maybe some leather shoes, because like I'm just trying to get it in your range of expertise that you're an expert in apparel, etc. So let's try
Yeah.
to build a store where we are selling leather goods and leather. Like let's start with leather shoes, not leather goods. So how would you start it? Like what would be the steps that you would follow?
I've actually talked to several people who wanted to start footwear companies, and several that have. Uh, well, first and foremost, I would go higher priced, um, for multiple reasons. Number one, for one shoe, you need like 8 SKUs, sizes, right? So it's already a capital intensive thing because you need many different sizes of just one. Number two, it's big. Shoes are big and they're heavy. So that's already another issue with warehousing and shipping. Number three, shoes are very subjective. So sizing, width, comfort, different shapes and sizes of feet. So you could potentially have a returns issue. So right off the bat, those are three things that I see as potential problems. Plus sides, you could go premium. You're saying leather shoes. I like a brand called Koyo. I've spent over $1,000 with them, buying multiple pairs of shoes. So that's also an opportunity. High customer lifetime value, repeat purchases if you have a good product, and potential first purchase profitability if your prices are high enough. So those are the pros and cons that I would look at from a business model perspective, like right off the bat.
And how do you gauge the market? So for example, you're planning to sell leather shoes, so you have to price it well. So even if you say premium pricing, you have to price it somewhere around, maybe I'm just throwing a number, so it could be 100 150 bucks. So how do you assume that the market will accept that price? And because there, like, it may happen that you may get early signals of people liking your product, but when you do it at scale, you might not get such a good reception. So people may not be willing to buy 100 and 150 bucks shoes at a scale. So how do you just get a good idea of market?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you do is look at the competitors if you want to see what's already in the market. And I actually happen to know this market decently well. So, like, I know around the $100 mark, you have things like Stan Smith from Adidas, which is not really real leather. You have things like Thursday, it's a good brand. Then you get a little bit higher into that tier two range where you're around the 250, 300 mark. You have brands like Koyo, right? And then you get to that $400, $500 mark. You have brands like Common Projects. So you start to kind of get a lay of the land. and understand the pros and cons of each segment. I look at everything as segmentation, right? Value versus price. So, and you start to get like if price is on the x-axis and or whatever price on the y-axis, is value is on the x-axis, you start to get like a plot, right, where it's like kind of a linear line. You get lower value, lower price, higher value, higher price, and you start to get these clusters. So for shoes, it would be like around 100, around 250, 300, around 400, 500. You get the Gucci, the Saint Laurents, etc. So you start to get this lay of the land, and then you figure out where you want to play. Right? Are you trying to go to battle with the Saint Laurent's, or are you trying to go to battle with the Stan Smiths, right? And then from there, you start to look at manufacturers, what you could actually manufacture this for, what your margins could be, and who your demographic could potentially be. Like who is not being serviced in that $100 mark. You have Thursday, which services the type of person. You have Adidas, which services the type of person. You have Air Force Ones, which services the type of person right in that price range. So I think that's the key: is who are you talking to and what are they buying today?
So basic identifying the gap that you see in the market.
Yeah, yeah. That's why a lot of companies are born just like Mansion was. I couldn't find a brand that I liked. I think it's important to try to solve a problem, not just say I want to make shoes. Like I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to make shoes, but what is the actual problem you're solving? Does anyone care about the shoes that you're trying to make? Or maybe you just want to make dope white shoes. Cool. But like, is there somebody else making very similar white shoes to what you're trying to do?
Right.
What's the
You mentioned a very
differentiator there?
interesting thing. You mentioned a very interesting thing here, because this is a it's a common hurdle that many come across, because when we all started e-commerce, etc., so all of us wanted to start a brand because we see a lot of potential, but we like, yeah, there are 100 ideas. Which one do we execute? So even I was with that, but recently I had a conversation with a guy who is into e-commerce, and who helps other brands to acquire each other. So he's into acquisition, so he understands pretty well how a brand gets created and how it sells to another brand, how it gets acquired. So he mentioned
Hmm.
a very interesting thing that like start with niche brands. So it's not always like you're solving a problem, because there are not many problems that remain unsolved today. Most of the
Hmm.
problems have been solved, so it's very difficult to find a problem that's not been solved. But find a specific group of people that you want to cater to, and there you can build a niche brand which can then be acquired very easily.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic approach. When I say problem, I agree with you. There's not many problems. Everyone has really good lives. you know, like
Right.
you're not going to reinvent a cup or something, right? But I agree with you. The problem for those niche people is that they like, even in the jewelry space, there's some really niche brands that kill it, and it's jewelry that I wouldn't wear in 1,000 years. But the aesthetic is amazing, the branding is amazing, the product for who it's meant for is amazing, and that's their niche in the jewelry space. So I completely agree with you. I think right now, in the past, you had, and still now, you had these big conglomerates, Nike and Anheuser-Busch and all these big companies. And then you kind of saw it from each different industry. Like for example, Anheuser-Busch, they purchased, I think it was Ballast Point, right? They start to, Blue Moon might've been the first craft brewery. So they start to purchase these micro companies that service specific niches. And I think that's true for all big businesses, right? Like we've been contacted by some major jewelry brands because people like me walk into a K Jewelers or something and I don't see anything that I like. So I think the way in general that big corporations are going are drilling down into these niches and just acquiring those instead of trying to do like a blanket for everything. I think people want more specialized, customized, personalized items.
So first, yeah, now we have discussed the first step was to analyze the market. Second thing, understanding what's the pricing that you want to have. You want to have a premium pricing for your store. So now you're like, now we'll get started with selling our leather boots. So what's the next step?
Well, depends on how you want to sell them. If your plan is to sell them using Facebook and Instagram ads, then start making content. Content is king when it comes to that. I think you test different content, you test videos, you test still images, you test still animations, and see what sticks. There's other opportunities there. Obviously, you could sell on different channels. You can sell on Amazon. You can go the retail route. Really depends on what you initially want your business model to be. Um, but overall, you're never going to know exactly what's going to resonate until you test. And I would even argue, like, before you place your purchase order for the inventory, you can get samples. You get samples, you can get a minimum viable product, and you can test that way. You can run ads with 5 pairs of shoes. You can stand up a website, a $500 Shopify, a $300 Shopify theme. There's a lot of ways to get your proof of concept with a minimum viable product where you don't have to go all in on a full inventory purchase and hit those oftentimes large MOQs for certain companies, for certain manufacturers, like shoes would have. Shoes would have a pretty large MOQ.
And given an option to start with running ads to your own Shopify store compared to starting off on a marketplace, which one would you pick and why?
Um, Sorry, 1 second. I do have a meeting now, but I could be a few minutes late here. So if I had to choose, I would say, again, it really depends. Like, I think the first decision you have to make is, are you trying to go like retail wholesale, or are you trying to go e-com? If you're trying to go e-com, then the first thing I would do is just get a minimum viable product, take photos, shoot some videos, set up a website for $400 and run ads to it. Now, the thing with ads is, like, it's a pixel that needs to learn, right? So you're going to have to run it for a while, and that could potentially mean losing some money, but you can get a decent gauge. You could see what your click through rates are, you could see what your conversion rate is. And, from that point forward, a huge first goal is one sale a day. If you can get one sale a day, you understand what it takes to get that sale. Now you have inputs to that formula: traffic, AOV, conversion rate. You have inputs, and then now you tweak. How do you get cheaper traffic that's still hot, qualified traffic? How do you increase your conversion rate? How do you increase your average order value or your customer lifetime value? And then you just try to make that formula better for all of time.
Yeah. And one last question for the brand that we are going to start together. So after you have set up the Shopify store, you started running ads, etc. How long would you wait to start like start putting efforts on retention?
Now you should start right away, immediately. Your email should be set up before you run ads. 100%. Because a lot of people need to see your brand 2 to 7 times to purchase, and a lot of people need to see it omni-channel. If you're running ads without your email being properly dialed in, you're leaving a shit ton of money on the table. So I think at bare minimum, what you need great product, you need great photography, you need a $300 Shopify website that looks great, which you don't have to, you just take the content, insert it in there, make sure everything's clean and nice. You need ads and you need email, and you could go. You could get some sort of information, some sort of input into that formula.
That's amazing. I think we have enough information to start a footwear brand now.
I love it. Let's do
So
it.
yeah, that's right. So, Fresh, yeah, thanks a lot for coming to this podcast. It was amazing. I think we almost spoke for an hour, and again, the thing that you bring to the table is very interesting from the agency and the brand perspective. So, this was why I wanted to get you on board, and thanks a lot for coming on board in just one cold message. So, I'm really thankful for your response and you coming over.
Totally. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate all the conversations you have with these different founders. Watched several of your videos. So stoked to see who you talk to next. And you got a fan. So thank you.
Thanks, Faraz. You're so kind. So, first, tell us where people can find you, where they can reach out to you.
Yeah. So handle on X is FERASTOTLE. It's Aristotle. And same thing on Instagram. And then on LinkedIn, it's just Feras Khouri. You can put maybe the spelling in
Yeah,
the description.
I'll drop the links on the description. So if anyone wants to, it's not an option. If anyone wants to, everyone should follow Faraz.
Appreciate it, man.
So
Thank you
first,
so much.
yeah. One last question that I ask all of my guests, because you are someone who have spoken to a lot of brands, who have worked with a lot of brands, and no question, you have built your own brand. So you have spoken to a lot, plenty of customers that I'm sure about. So this entire podcast is all about what consumers really care. So I want to ask you, what do you think consumers really care about?
The product. That's all it comes down to. They care about the product. As much as I want to say brand, I want to say brand, I want to say all this. I think number one is product. And I think number two, it's very important that they resonate with what you are and what you stand for. Right. But overall, number one for longevity is the product.
Damn, that's like hitting it straight on the head. So
Yeah.
yeah, man, I think that's pretty much it. It's all about your product. You're doing an e-commerce business. What's more important than the product that you sell? Nothing else.
That's it.
Nothing else could be
Yeah.
more important. So, Feras, thank you so much. Thanks again. It was a real pleasure hosting you and recording this podcast. I hope people who are watching this podcast must have enjoyed our conversation, and we'll reach out to Feras in case they have any queries, and we'll follow him for sure because he posts a lot of great tweets and content on his social media. So, guys, this is where we wrap up this episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, drop a like, drop a comment, tell me if you are liking this thing because it takes a lot of time to record and like calling people like Ferris. So it takes a lot of time. So I want you to let me know if you find it interesting, and I'll drop some links of other podcasts that you can go and watch. More people like Ferris dropping some like huge insights about e-commerce and just product consumer businesses. So yeah, that's the wrap, guys. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.